So, we're here in Sturgis, South Dakota, and we have a team called the Tattoo Storyhunters. And we're at the Sturgis Bike Rally, and about 400 to 600,000 people are here. And sort of the sound is you hear motorcycles 24 hours a day. Even when you're sleeping, you can hear them. It's like a beehive. But one of the precious times that we have together is every morning the team gets together and has coffee, and we just let it flow. And one of my observations is the hearts of our team members are just saying their discoveries, and it's really worth hearing. We're in the middle of this crazy carnival of people dressed in costumes and you know 300,000 motorcycles of every shape, and a human moment breaks out, and these team members seem to know how to handle a tattoo with such gentleness that the people tell their secrets. And we've had a lot of tears, we've had a lot of hugs, we have a lot of people walking up and saying, why would I tell you my story? And 20 minutes later, they've made discoveries of what's under their tattoos. And this watching these team members this week has been one of the highlights of my whole year.
You know, one of my discoveries, even this morning, just thinking back through yesterday and interacting with people with tattoos and getting their stories, is that I'm learning that in my interaction with them, that I can't deal with them the way that I deal with everyone. There's got to be a tenderness and a care and a gentleness. And I think one of the things that Al has challenged me in is just starting to work on my doctrine of evangelism and what that looks like. And in that, I'm learning that there's two sets of gloves that we've got to use when we're dealing with people. And one glove is used to deal with those who are self-righteous and think that they have arrived and they've kept the law, and the other is dealing with the broken and those who, are just fragile. And I think we sometimes try to deal with both of those people with the same set of gloves, and you can't. You have to hear which person you're dealing with before you'll know which glove to use. And I just think that's a big lesson that I'm learning, that there's got to be a tenderness as I'm dealing with those who are broken and been through a lot of suffering, and and dealing with those who are self-righteous. There's a whole different approach. And so I think we sometimes as a church just sort of taking the cookie cutter approach and dealing with humanity and people, and you can't do that.
Ryan, do you remember one interview in particular?
Yeah, I remember the interview with, what's the little girl's name? Randy.
Yeah, Randy.
Yeah, Randy in particular. And Randy's a very attractive girl, and she had, a story, her whole life story of her tattoos. And, one of her first stories was as a little girl, she didn't have any friends. She had no friends growing up because she had a boy's name, Randy, and she was sort of a tomboy. And because she had no friends, she read lots of books, and her books were her friends. And so she had a tattoo of these books going up her leg, and there were two of those books that were open, and those were the stories of her little girls, which she said was the most precious thing in her life. But as Randy continued to share her story of not having friends as a little girl to abuses and things of that nature, you begin to realize that Randy didn't necessarily need to be truthed with the gospel, but she needed to be loved and shown mercy and grace. And tenderness and compassion, and I think that's, one of the things again that I'm learning is that that's the way Jesus handled things. As he dealt with the woman who was caught in adultery, as he dealt with those who were just a mess like we all are. And then at times when he addressed the Pharisees and the Sadducees, he put on a different set of gloves in dealing with them. And I think just the sage and who he was, he knew which gloves he needed as he brought the love and hope of God to people.
That's good. What are you thinking, Rose?
I'm thinking about kind of what you've said. There's this carnival behind us that's so loud and noisy, and that these strangers will see the sign, or they'll stop and start looking at the book, and they'll ask us, what's this about? And we say, we're listening to stories about tattoos. Do you want to share one? And they do. And they are profound, and they are personal. And as you said earlier, there are tears. We are able to say thank you to servicemen and women for their service, and their tattoos are the therapy of the things that they have done for our country, and the things that they've witnessed, and the people that they have lost. And we're able to enter into those stories with them, and it is very humbling that they would trust a complete stranger, because they're really, for them to share what they're sharing, they have to have trusted us that we're not going to reject them or ridicule them, or that there's an authenticity in our question, what's your story? Because some have shared that others have asked, oh, you got a tattoo? And then they turn around and they start talking, what's it mean? And then they turn and start talking to somebody else, that there wasn't an authenticity behind that question, and how hurtful that was for them, because that tattoo did have a story, it had a meaning, and they felt the rejection of, I'm not important. And so we've heard from many people, thank you, what you're doing is important. Thank you for listening. Thank you for helping others to feel comfortable to listen.
So, Rose, you interviewed, I call her Music Notes. I think she's Shia.
Yes.
What? Tell me about that.
She was one of our first interviews. She's a sweet young lady. I think one reason why I connect so deeply with her is she's pregnant, and as a mother of 4, that is a special place for me. And when she shared her story, you actually were the first one to speak with her, and you asked her about the music on her leg, and she said, I don't tell everybody, especially if it's a creepy guy at a bar. Yeah, I give a decoy answer. I just say, yeah, it's just the music I like. But then immediately she started sharing that the music was written backwards, and that's on purpose, and that it started from kind of an open area where it's not really a completed song, and it's moving towards the clef note, or the treble clef, and she goes, each note is a time I've tried to take my life and didn't succeed, and that moving towards that clef, that she knows that she has a purpose, that there's a reason why she's still here. And then she shared that, she's 8 months sober and clean, and that she didn't even know she was pregnant when she got clean and sober, but she was. and that she's had other children that she's lost. But this time, she's clean and sober for this pregnancy. So yeah, she has touched my heart dearly that she was willing to share such personal things, and to a group, because it wasn't a one-on-one interview, it was a group interview because it was one of our first and we were learning what we were doing. And she had said, I don't share this with guys, but yet she felt safe enough, this group, to share.
So Rose, one of the things we find is that our tattoo strangers become friends, and then they get inside of us. And we sort of hope they never leave. In other words, they become part of our parish. And Rose woke up the other morning, all the other men were snoring, and we were happily doing so, but not Rose. She woke up in 4 or 5 a.m. What happened there, Rose?
I don't know. I just felt a battle, a spiritual battle, hard to put into words, and all I could say in my mind, I couldn't even speak aloud, was all hail King Jesus, for over and over again for several minutes. And then I just started praying over all of us, over this home, over the Petersons who so graciously hosted us, over each of us, that we would be protected in the spiritual battle, that we are doing something, and that the enemy had taken notice of us. That's really the sense that I got, that the enemy had taken notice of what we were doing here. And then certain interviews came to mind, one of them being Shia, and just praying over her and that precious child, that she would remain clean and sober. And just praying for her. And then to go into that day, after we met here on the porch and spoke, we went to the booth that day, it was a tremendously busy day. And to realize in retrospect that God had awakened me, because we needed to be prepared for the battle that day. To enter into people's stories, we did over 40 interviews that day, which is emotionally draining, because we are entering into these stories and we are connecting with people. And when they're telling us about the tombstones on their arms, of their grandparents, of their sister, of their uncle who committed suicide, when they tell us of their joys too, of maybe their grandchildren that are their children's grandchildren, and their space left for more on their arm. We're the person who has a memorial for their sobriety, their 3-month, their 1 year, their 5 year. We're entering into those stories with them, and it's weighty stuff. And that particular day, we did a lot of interviews, and I think God was preparing us for that through prayer, through the preparation of getting together and praying and talking about it that morning.
One of the things, Al, I think is that we're learning is, as we talk with these people and engage them, is, they're really saying, do you see me? Do you hear me? Can you listen long enough that you begin to care? And I think that's what I'm learning, is if you listen long enough, you'll begin to care. You'll begin to gain a heart for these people. They'll become a part of your parish and a part of your flock that you see as yours, and as those that God has given you to share the hope of Christ and the hope of the gospel.
Playing out right in front of us, there's a house a block away that the Hells Angels own. And this week is recruiting week and initiation week. And so walking in front of our booth are these very hardened very sober, leave me alone and don't mess with me. Young and old men that are being recruited by the Hells Angels. And then also is our families and singles and policemen all right in front of us. This thing is playing out. And, you know, we're learning that even in the midst of all that chaos, this precious humanity hits us. And it's changing me to hear the stories, especially as the people discover what's under their tattoo right in front of us. What I'm always struck by is how people have not had the opportunity to introspect what's under their own tattoo. What are you thinking, Michael?
Just pivoting off of what you said about people not introspecting. Here, as we have seen, there's so many people who, for years and years, decades in some instances, a majority of their life in some instances, they've been tattooing the story of their journey. And yet, when they come by the booth and are captured by the sign that says, "Does your tattoo have a story?" it's as if it's the first time that anybody's bothered to ask that question. And they come to a Sturgis motorcycle rally, I don't think necessarily setting out to deal with that particular question in life. I'm thinking about a man I met yesterday, Preston, probably in his 40s, nice young guy. We talked, and he was captured immediately by this question. And when he heard that we really would give him a book if he'd be willing to share his story, he balked and hesitated a minute. There was a little bit of suspicion. There must be something behind this. I said, no, it's just we're curious about you. And he began to talk. And he explained to me what was on his right arm and why and what its meaning was. And then he came to his left arm and he showed the forearm. And in beautiful calligraphy were the letters of his daughter that sort of wrapped his arm. And then down in one section here, he said that there's a promise cross. And there was the cross, the Christian cross. And that was embedded in a heart, and then his daughter's initials. And he explained to me as he continued to look at that promise cross, I gave that to my daughter when she was born, and I promised her that I would be the best father she could ever have. And before he completed the sentence, he welled up. He just looked at that cross. And there was a moment of silence as he was composing himself. I said, Preston, what's that about? He said, man, I've really screwed up. I've made some very bad decisions. I said, is your daughter with you? Yeah. Does she love her daddy? He smiled while he sniffled and said, yes. I said, join the club, friend. We've all messed up. You've got another day. You've got this life. He said, yeah. I'm blown away. I'm surprised that happened. He said, and then he looked at me with a little bit of anger but playfulness, saying, you know, you're some son of a bitch for making me cry. And as I shook his hand and kind of held him a little bit, as guys do in a moment like that, I said, most people don't walk away from me having said that with a smile on their face, but I'm glad that you are right now. Yeah. And a few moments later, I asked if I could capture that moment in a picture, and I had a chance to look at it afterward. He's got a beautiful smile on his face. And still, as he walked away, he was shaking his head like, I don't know what just happened to me, and then looked back and went his way. You can't script life.
Why?
Because it's not real when you script it. It's not authentic. And while the brokenness and the hurt that was expressed in Preston, I'm sure has been there for a long time. And he's reminded of it every day he looks at his arm. He had apparently a need to just let it out, to have it borne witness to by somebody else, rather than carrying it on his own. And maybe that's what the tattoo phenomenon is in part, is to say, look, this happened to me. This is who I am, even though I may not be happy about it. I wish someone else would see me and know me and hear me and welcome me. That's what I'm struck by.
Michael,